In December 1943, inside a brick hut at Bletchley Park, a machine switched on that could, by any modern definition, program itself. It ran on thousands of glowing vacuum tubes, doing something nothing on Earth had done before. Britain called it Colossus, built to crack Nazi Germany's most guarded cipher. Then Britain called it nothing at all. For decades, if you'd asked a government official whether Colossus existed, the honest answer was a felony. By the end of this, you'll know why the country that invented the modern computer buried it, and how a stubborn engineer resurrected it from almost nothing at all. History books gave the world's first computer trophy to an American machine, unveiled with great fanfare. Nobody could correct the record without admitting a secret that officially didn't exist. So credit went where the cameras were allowed. Rewind further. Every day, German high command sent orders across occupied Europe, scrambled inside a cipher called tunny, and cracking it was Bletchley's job. Their best tool was a room of electromechanical calculators, brute forcing the possibilities one at a time. Given enough time, they worked. The trouble was the time. Days per message, sometimes longer, a fine turnaround for a crossword, and a terrible one for a war. Mathematician Max Newman had the fix on paper: search for patterns at electronic speed instead of mechanical speed. Turning paper into hardware nobody had built at that scale was the problem. So a post office engineer named Tommy Flowers made a proposal that earned him some very funny looks. Build it out of vacuum tubes, wired together at a scale nobody had attempted. At the time, tubes were known for exactly one thing: burning out. Bletchley's own scientists thought Flowers was chasing a fantasy. Stacking that many tubes together sounded less like engineering and more like an elaborate way to start a fire. He built it anyway, at the post office's own research lab, without waiting for anyone above him to sign off. If it worked, brilliant. If it didn't, he'd burned public money on a room of glowing glass for nothing. And somewhere on a calendar, nobody in that lab could see, an invasion was already counting down. It worked. Colossus went live, started chewing through tunny traffic, and turned Bletchley's whole timeline inside out. The job that used to take days now took minutes. Flowers' glowing fire hazard hadn't just survived. It had made every calculator in that room look like a museum piece. Bletchley didn't say thank you. It said, build more, a request the engineers privately clocked as impossible the moment they heard it. They said yes anyway. Nobody at Bletchley was in the habit of explaining why a deadline mattered, only that it did. Whatever was coming was big enough to justify an order that absurd, and secret enough that history would spend decades pretending none of it happened. The engineers who pulled it off wouldn't get so much as a byline for their trouble. They pulled it off with hours to spare. In the dark before dawn, the new machine came online and started reading. And what it read was Hitler's own confidence, intact and misplaced. The deception campaign had worked. German high command still believed the landing would come somewhere else entirely, and Colossus proved it in black and white, cipher already broken, days before a single soldier hit the sand. The impossible deadline had been for exactly this moment. Nobody watching the beaches that morning knew a room full of vacuum tubes had already told London how it would end. Victory came, and the machines went quiet, not from neglect, but by direct order. Within weeks of Germany's surrender, the government that built 10 working Colossus machines to help win the war decided the safest place for most of them was in pieces. Not mothballed, not archived, broken down deliberately until nothing recognizable as a computer remained. Machines that may have shortened the war by years, by some estimates, were treated not as an achievement but as evidence, something to dispose of, quickly and quietly, the moment they'd finished their job. The documentation and technical details of those machines were similarly classified and kept from public knowledge for decades. The men and women who built it were bound by strict secrecy, with information about their work remaining classified for decades. Not to their wives, not to their children, not in memoirs, not in interviews, not on deathbeds. Whatever recognition Flowers or Coombs had earned was buried with the machine, permanently, by law. 2 machines escaped that first purge. Nobody in the surviving record says why. Which 2, whose decision, or what they were still being used for, quietly inside British intelligence, while officially none of this had ever existed. For 15 more years, they sat somewhere, running or not, answerable to no public record at all. Then, sometime in the 1960s, they too were dismantled. Nothing physical of the original Colossus machines remained anywhere on Earth after that, until a reconstruction was completed decades later. The silence didn't just cost the men their names, it cost the machine its influence. For decades, the secrecy surrounding Colossus meant that its pioneering work in programmable computing remained unknown to the wider computer industry. Then, in the early 1970s, the government finally decided the secrecy had gone on long enough. He had no security clearance and no official standing, just persistence, and a habit of asking the same uncomfortable question until someone in Whitehall got tired of answering it. Eventually, someone did. After decades of official denial, the government finally admitted Colossus had existed at all and handed over its entire concession to history. Admitting the machine had existed didn't hand any of it back. No blueprint survived the initial secrecy. No spare parts, no original Colossus remained. Only fragments of knowledge held by a dwindling group of engineers who had built it. Then, in the early 1990s, Bletchley Park itself faced an uncertain future. One man was about to make that a very expensive mistake. That man was Tony Sale, and he led the effort to preserve Bletchley Park as a historical site. That bought him the building. It didn't buy him a computer. With the site secured, the team turned to reconstructing the machine itself, working from historical documentation and the knowledge of surviving engineers. The reconstruction relied on careful detective work, combining fragments of memory with technical analysis of available documentation. Sale's team welded, wired, and hoped, correcting course whenever some detail refused to make electrical sense. As the rebuild progressed, additional historical records emerged that clarified the original design. Circuits the team had rebuilt from memory alone turned out to be right. Others weren't even close. The paperwork Britain burned in 1945 had apparently kept a backup copy nobody had mentioned. Sale kept going anyway, because right and close still didn't add up to running. After years of painstaking work, Tony Sale and his team finally completed a fully working Colossus Mark II in 2008, wired exactly as the original had been, humming and clattering back to life inside Bletchley Park. 14 years after he started, the team finally threw the switch on a fully working Colossus Mark II, wired exactly the way the original crew had wired theirs, humming and clattering back to life inside Bletchley Park. This was the machine Britain had spent decades insisting didn't exist, rebuilt from little more than a handful of old photographs and second-hand memory. Nothing physical had survived the original, so technically, none of this was a restoration at all. It was a resurrection, valve by glowing valve. While sales team pieced that history back together from scratch, GCHQ was apparently still sitting on more of it. In January 2024, the agency released a batch of previously unseen Colossus photographs, not from Bletchley Park, but from what's believed to be its own facility in Cheltenham. A re-engineered Colossus, decades later, somewhere it was never supposed to be photographed at all. Whatever recognition Randall's fight had won in the 70s, the file wasn't actually closed. The machine you can now walk up to and watch hum back to life is the one Britain spent decades swearing under oath didn't exist. GCHQ keeps opening drawers nobody knew were locked. Every fresh photograph is an admission. The last release wasn't the whole story, which leaves one obvious question nobody in Cheltenham seems eager to answer. What does the room look like that they haven't shown you yet?